Okay, I want to share some ideas with you today about alignment with the highest universal value as the pathway to peace and purpose. The question is, why am I surrounded by conflict? And why sometimes do even peaceful people make trouble with one another? And what is the purpose of life if there is no peace? The reason we have conflict is because we do not share a common understanding of the highest universal value of life, and therefore we cannot know our own value, and therefore we cannot know our own purpose of existence. Because we do not share a common understanding of the highest universal value of life. Everyone dreams of world peace, but if there are even two nations at war, there's no world peace. And if there are even two provinces at war within the nation, there is no peace within the nation. And so on. If there are two villages at war in the province, then the province cannot be a peaceful province. And if there are two families at war within the village, there is no peace within the village. And if there are even two people at war within the family, then there's no peace within the family. So the question becomes, how is peace possible? Where does it begin? So the first thing to understand, I think, is that peace is possible between two parts when they harmonize, centering on a common value that is higher than each of them independently. So they're both connected to that higher value, but it is greater than both of them independently. And it serves them both to be harmonized in this way. So for example, let's take the case of two partners who establish a company. They want to make a lot of money. There's going to come a point where they conflict, where they have differences of opinion, different ideas that are not harmonized. But if they can remember the higher purpose of their endeavor, the higher purpose of their relationship is to make a successful company, then they will find a way to harmonize their differences centered on that higher value of the company. And then hopefully they will be successful. But if they make a successful company by means of some illegal activity, let's say, then even if they're making a lot of money, at that higher level, they will find themselves now at war with the laws of the city. Right? So it's not enough just for them to harmonize centering on a value that is higher than just both of them, but ultimately they need to harmonize centering on a value that's higher than them, higher than the company, higher than the city, and ultimately higher than the nation and the world. This would be best. The higher our anchor point, the higher our relationship with the highest possible universal central point of life and value of life, the higher our own value, and therefore the higher our purpose, our sense of purpose, right? So it is impossible to create a peaceful province if the villages are not living in accordance with the higher value purpose of the province. And it's impossible to have a nation, a peaceful nation, if the provinces within the nation are not living according to the higher standards of the nation. And likewise, it is impossible for the world to be peaceful until all nations are living according to values that are higher than themselves. The question becomes, what is the ultimate universal value? What is the highest value upon which we can harmonize all of our relationships. For world peace to exist, the highest universal value must be greater than the world. Right? That's logical. It must come from that which created all things. We may say heaven or God. We have so many different interpretations of what this is that even if it exists, we can certainly agree that we don't agree on a universal understanding of this universal highest value. This is a big problem. This is a big problem. And I believe it's huge part of the problem that is keeping peace away. So we have to understand anything less than alignment with the highest possible universal value is a compromise, just like in the case of those two partners making the business. It's not enough to be short-sighted and just seek that which I want for myself or we want for our own selves. It ultimately has to be in harmony with the highest possible value. Otherwise, at some point in the future, we will come into conflict or create problems for others. So clearly, there have been a lot of problems throughout human history. And I remember thinking that the root of all these problems was simply, religious war. I was probably a young teenager with my father visiting my great-grandmother at the time. We used to visit her every Sunday for tea in Wimbledon, London. And at some point, one of these Sundays, the conversation got onto the topic of war. And I thought I knew everything, and I shared my opinion that, the root of all war is religion. If we just get rid of religion, then we won't have war anymore. My grandmother kicked me really hard. This sweet, beautiful she was almost 100 years old. This beautiful lady, this old lady, kicked me under that. She'd never done anything like that. I was shocked. I remember that stuck with me for years until eventually I came to understand that actually religions have been playing a central role throughout human history to guide us to a better understanding of this universal value, the universal laws of heaven, right? But each religion holds on to its own views, which are often in conflict with one another. So even if we do experience peace and unity within our own religion tradition, faith tradition, can we say that we can create world peace if the other religions are at war with one another? No. The truth is that even within religious faiths, there are large gaps and conflicts. So then you might say, well, religions need to come together, right? The religious bodies are the ones guiding us to this point. And if the religions just unite together, then everything will be made clear and we can just follow them. But centering on what will they come together? Centering on what point will they come together? Centering on whose understanding? We have to find the common denominator between all religions. And I know you might say it's love. But all religions preach love and empathy and consideration for others. And yet, still we fight. We fight because of one reason. It must be that our understanding about love, our understanding about empathy, our understanding of these universal truths may not be high enough. Our understanding, even the highest level of understanding, is still obviously not high enough. So we can get up this high, but then still there's some conflict there. We need to find the highest universal value, the highest point at which all things are connected. Otherwise, we will continually run into conflict sooner or later. We fight because our understanding of the highest universal value is lower than it actually is. So we are compromised. Our understanding is compromised, and therefore the basis of our unity is fractured. Right? So to understand the highest form of love is to understand the highest origin, the original point of the universe, which means we need to understand the purpose of it all. To understand the highest universal value, we need to understand its purpose, to understand the purpose of creation itself. Ultimately, why do we exist? Why are we here? Now, I remember when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was going for a walk with my father in the park. And I was thinking about this question as I was walking. I was pondering this question. Why am I alive? What is this all for? I was only 4 or 5, but I remember it clearly. And I was walking behind my father, and he went through a gate, and he stopped. He opened the gate for me to pass through. And I looked up to him and I said, "Daddy, why are we here? Why do we exist?" And he looked down at me and he said, "Kiddo, there are a lot of people around the world asking that same question." I remember thinking, wow, all these people bigger than me asking this question, and still we don't know why we're here. But the question I want you to think of is, why as a 5-year-old boy did I look up at my dad and ask him? I totally expected him to have the answer to this question. Why? I believe my dad knew everything there is to know, right? That is the original heart of a child towards our parent. Our parents are our heroes. We come from them. They are our origin. As children, our parents are our highest form of universal value. They are our origin. They are our parents. They love us. They would die to save us from harm. This is the most beautiful love that exists in creation, this parental love. We see it throughout the animal kingdom, and we especially see it among human beings. Even bad human beings usually go out of their way to do their best to save their children, to serve and sacrifice for their children. Where does this love come from? Where does this highest form of human love come from? It comes from God. It comes from God because that is God's nature. Parental love is God's nature, and parental love is the characteristic of this highest form of universal value. God as our parent. So the answer to the question about the origin of the universe is the relationship between parent and child. This is the original impulse of creation itself. As human beings, we are unique in all of creation because we were created to be born as God's children. We are unique in that. That means God had us in mind, just like Michelangelo can see the statue in the stone before he starts chipping. Don't you think God also could envision the ultimate goal of the entire universe? It was us. His son, his daughter, the two that would become true parents for all of humankind and give birth to God's lineage as God's children. Us. We are the masterpiece of heaven. Of what in heaven? Of God in heaven. What kind of masterpiece are we? Are we just a statue of stone? No, we are living, breathing, spiritual and physical beings who come from God's love and the impulse to love us and create us as God's children. There is our understanding of the highest universal value, and therefore there is our understanding of our value and purpose. God had us in mind and then created all of the universe and all of creation and the laws of creation such that we could be born inside it and grow to maturity and become substantial bodies as God's children and give birth to God's families forever. For us to grow up in these kind of families, healthy and happy. Father Moon says this. He says, "What do you think is God's ultimate purpose for creating human beings? Simply put, it is to experience joy through relating with ideal families filled with true love." Think about it. If God does exist, what kind of a God would you like to have? A ruler God? A judging God? A distant God? As children, there is no one greater than our parents. There's nothing we can imagine that's greater than our parents, right? Parents are our heroes. The truth is that God is our parent, our heavenly parent. This is the only explanation that can make any sense. It's the only explanation that can surpass all other expectations and all other hopes that lie within the human heart. There's no greater title that we could give God. There's no greater wish that we could have than that God would be our heavenly parent. And therefore there's no greater status that we could ask for than to be the children of God, the princes and princesses of God and God's kingdom. There's no explanation that can surpass this. And it's natural for human beings to reach for the greatest thing, to imagine the most hopeful thing. So there's nothing higher than that we could possibly imagine. That would satisfy the deepest hope within the human heart. And yet, look at reality. We live in a troubled world. So, where will peace begin? Where does peace begin? Like all religions will promote, it starts with me, right? Peace starts with me, but it is developed and perfected in the family. And this is quite easy to agree with, quite easy to understand, but incredibly, geniusly enlightening to understand. And if we can understand this point, we can change the world and we can build a world of peace. So, in the case of a family, for example, the children ultimately learn to harmonize, centering on the will and the love of the parents. That is why the family is the first school of love, the first school of society, and the first school of universal values. So you can say that peace starts with me, but it is perfected in the family. We all know it's common for siblings to squabble, but our parents do something. What do? They guide us to share. They guide us to communicate, to forgive, and to learn. Ideally, as we grow, we eventually come to realize that our parents have been guiding us all this time, being patient with us, loving us, feeding us, sacrificing us, and then ultimately we may come to realize our own selfish thinking as children. And we start to feel that our parents' burdens are our burdens, and we want to help them. And we realize that one way to help them is by harmonizing among the siblings and by working together. This is the foundation for us to understand also our relationship with God, just like within the family. If the brothers and sisters realize that the parents are doing everything for their happiness and joy, but they're hurting their parents' heart by fighting amongst the siblings, then they'll realize to harmonize among the siblings brings great joy and peace to the heart of the parents. This is the same heart that we have to have as villages within the province, provinces within the nation, and nations within the world. We have to understand that God is our heavenly parent and that we are causing our heavenly parent frustration and pain by delaying the day upon which we can all live in one harmony, happy, ideal, joyful families together with God. Because we have conflict, because we do not harmonize, because we are constantly putting a limiting universal value concept in our way. We are trying to, bring success with limited levels of understanding of our highest universal value. We're compromised all the way from top to bottom. So think about it in reality. How can we apply this understanding to our daily lives? Think about the times that you find yourself in conflict with others. Actually, we can't control the behavior and choices of others, but we do have a huge influence on each other. So next time you find yourself in some kind of conflict, take a moment to reflect and seek a higher viewpoint that is a universal, at least one level up, that is universal in nature such that both sides could agree. And consider how to view this fight from a higher viewed perspective. This is the first step towards bringing some peace within your environment. And then try remembering that ultimately we're all brothers and sisters, and that we cannot ever find our true happiness and peace if others are suffering. So even if we do find some harmony here, we cannot really be happy if our neighbors are also fighting, if the other villages are fighting, if the other nations are fighting, and so on. There's really no such thing as even a peaceful nation if other nations are at war, let alone a peaceful world. You see? Because we were all born to be as one family, and just like we experience in our own family, unless everyone is at peace, no one is at peace. All for one, and one for all. That is what our religions of today need to understand. As hard as our faith leaders are working to try and save people, or try to raise people's consciousness, to try and raise people's standards to a higher value, unless the religions can bring people to the highest value of all, which is a common understanding of within which everything fits, then they can only bring us so far, which is the reality if we study the history of religious conflict. So, when you're faced with tough choices, try considering the impact on others. Try looking at it from your parents' perspective, right? What would your parents say if this was my brother? How would my parents look at this relationship, right? Or how would my grandparents look at this relationship? Because that we're learning within the family is teaching us how to relate with God, how to understand God. God is a living entity with love and purpose and will and longing to live with us in joy, just like we heard Father say. So only when all human beings, all religions, all races and nations recognize and attend our Heavenly Parent as our highest reference point, only then will there be a foundation for lasting peace, real peace and prosperity. Real peace and sense of purpose, because that is our purpose, to create that culture, to create that lasting peace. And this is the time that we are living in. Now is the era that human beings are finally supposed to figure this out. We cannot go any further centering on any one religious concept or any one national level idea. We cannot go any further centering on human ideas. We have to recognize that we will not find our value unless we know where we come from, and we cannot know where we come from unless we recognize that we are children of the highest possible being of creation, which is the universal parent of all, our heavenly parent, and we are the heavenly sons and daughters of that heavenly parent. And that is why we come together. That is why we are here. That is why we're building community together, because it's not easy. And we need to study together. We need to practice together. We need to learn together, forgive one another, and create this kind of heavenly community where individuals and families can come together to learn from one another, support one another. That's why we're working together with all religions and all races of the world. That is the purpose of the Heavenly Parent Holy Community. So with that, I want to conclude with Mother's word. She says, within the Heavenly Parent Holy Community, all of humanity and all religions should come together under the umbrella of the Heavenly Parent and build a new civilization and a new human history. One that is characterized by unity centering on God. That is how we can become lights of hope for humanity. That is my blessing to you today. This is Mother's word, this is Mother's guidance, and this is True Mother's blessing to us today. There's so much in just this that it would be worth our while to really reflect on it and try to really think, yeah, if God really did exist, and if God really is alive, and if God really did create everything for the purpose of creating me and everyone else to be living as one happy family under Heavenly Parent, what kind of a person would I need to be to fit in that kind of a world? What kind of choices would I have to make in order to live in that kind of a world? What would that kind of a world look like, and what kind of a citizen of that world would I need to be to fit in that world? This is who we are, brothers and sisters. This is where we're going. So shake it up, think about it, and pray that God can guide you to recognize your true purpose as God's son, as God's daughter, and you are alive because our Heavenly Parent wants to live with you in joy and purpose. This understanding will unfold the pathway to peace if we can recognize the highest common universal meeting point, universal value, which is that God is our Heavenly Parent and we are God's children. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Have a great day and have a great week.